Good day and welcome back to The Shed. Today I would like to go back to the inaugural Hugo Award-winning author in Alfred Bester. This time we'll take a look at his 1980 novel, Golem 100. So what I would like to do, as always, is provide a spoiler-free plot overview. I'll talk to what I liked, what I didn't like, I'll make some recommendations, and I'll give this one a rating. So the novel is set in the year 2175 in this dystopian future in the northeast of the US in a place called the Gulf. And what we find is that there's this group of women who refer to themselves as the Beehive, led by this lady called Regina, who are sort of bored. They're wealthy individuals and they're sort of bored with life, and to succumb their boredom, they feel that the best way to do that is to delve into some satanic rituals and try to actually summon the devil. On the other hand, we have this chemist who's gifted with this wonderful sense of smell, who's working for this large perfume company. And they've been a bit concerned for him because he hasn't quite been performing the way he does. Mind you, he's made millions for this organization, but he hasn't quite been performing the way he ought to be. And they're a little bit concerned. So in their concern, they hired the services of this private investigator and a person called Gretchen Nunn to follow him around to try to get to the bottom of what could be causing his lack of focus and why he is not performing the way he normally does. Now, Gretchen Nunn is an interesting person because she's got an interesting way of seeing the world, because she's blind, but she can see the world through people around her, which I thought was really fascinating. In the meanwhile, we find that there's a whole lot of horrific murders are taking place in the Gulf. They've been killed in the most horrific and terrible circumstances. And what we learn is that this chemist in Blaze is also having some amnesia and he's suffering some sleepwalking episodes. So in comes this detective, this guy called Idney, to investigate these murders. And what we find is that the trio of Blaze the chemist, with the private investigator in Nunn, and this police officer in Idney, combined forces to see if they could get to the bottom of this horrific murders, get to the bottom of why Blaze is having these memory blackouts, and see if these little games that the Beehive are having has got something to do with this horrific murders happening in the Gulf. So what a fascinating novel I thought this one was. So what is there to like in Golem 100 by Alfred Bester? For me, it would have to be the experiment of it all. I mean, this novel is just made up, probably half of just interesting graphics and music notations and bizarre imagery. It's just interesting, right? All these ink blots. And I say that, about a third of the book is like that. But what makes it also interesting is the fact that he also takes that to the literary style as well. So sometimes the writing in different chapters takes on a different voice and a different style altogether. And it appears to me that Bester was really trying to push all the boundaries that he could with this one. And it almost feels like he was on just one huge acid trip at times. Really fascinating, really interesting structure to this one that is unlike anything else on my shelf behind me here, and it must be pushing close to 500 books now. So very unique. I did really enjoy the uniqueness and the structure and the experiment of this one. But underlying it all, I also quite enjoyed the plot. Now, this is your typical Alfred Bester mind-bending murder mystery novel, and this one pushes the envelope, like I said. But I did like the underlying story. I did like that murder mystery, and I thought it kept me engaged throughout, and it had me really wondering how all these things were going to come together, which did not let me down. I also like this dystopian view that Alfred Bester painted in this novel, because it was really a hopeless and bleak world that he painted here. But what was rather interesting is that all of the characters in the novel didn't really seem to be concerned with any of the dystopian world that they lived in. They sort of pretty much accepted it the way it was and didn't really concern themselves with it, which I thought was probably quite accurate, right? I sometimes feel that, you get used to the world you live in, and it's not until time passes and people look back that they feel like, geez, they were interesting times or terrible times. But the people in the time happened to make do, which was sort of fascinating in this as well. So I did like that dystopian view that Alfred Bester brought to the table. So I also enjoyed the satirical and spontaneous and sometimes shocking way the story was told to us, that I think it was really an interesting read. So what is there not to like in Golem 100? Look, this one had me sitting on the fence for quite some time, to be honest, because I think you either get this novel or you don't. And I'd have to say I was sitting on the fence for a long part of this novel, but as I continued reading it and being familiar with some of Bester's other works, it sort of started to make sense to me. And by the end of the book, I can say I'm in the I like it camp. It was rather interesting. But what is there that I didn't like that kept me sitting on the fence? Look, sometimes this one can be quite shocking when it comes to the sexual assaults that happen in this novel, right? It's sometimes pages of it, and it can be a little bit hard to swallow, and I've got to say at times it was a bit more than shocking. It was almost distasteful, but also in the sense that it felt at times it was more than just shocking. It almost felt like there was pleasure to be gained by having read this, right? It was sort of weird the way it was told. It was almost like the author was having a bit of a joke about this, and I don't know, it could be a personal thing, but it sometimes pushed the boundaries of what I felt comfortable with. And look, I don't want to sound prudish, and I'm maybe exaggerating a bit just to highlight what I saw in the novel, because I don't want to make it more than what it really was. But there were sections in the novel that I thought just pushed the envelope maybe a little bit too far. So when it comes to recommendations, can I recommend this bizarre, and that's probably going to be the thumbnail image here for this one, can I still recommend this absolutely bizarre novel? And I would have to say, yeah, 100%. I really do enjoy Alfred Bester. He's only got a small body of works, and I've read them all, except for Golem 100. This was the only one I hadn't come to in Alfred Bester's body. I think he's got 5 or 6 novels. But I gotta say that for the experiment alone, I think it is worth it. But you will also see in this novel what I think makes Alfred Bester a great science fiction author, right? So yeah, I will still highly recommend it. But be warned, I guess, this one can be shocking. It can be confronting. It is disjointed. It will be like, I just flicked open a page, random page, right? It will be like nothing else you've read before. So I'd say if you're coming knowing that, I think you may walk away, as I did, enjoying this one. But I've got to stress, you may walk away from this thinking that this is probably one of the worst novels you've ever read. Definitely not my experience. So who would I recommend this one to? Because it's a strange one. And I had to think long and hard about this, because I honestly don't feel there is anything similar to this on my bench behind me here. But I am going to point out a couple of novels. And one that comes to mind is obviously none other than Alfred Bester himself in The Demolished Man. And the reason I want to point this one out, apart from that it's from the same author, is because this is a reverse murder mystery novel as well, right? Which is, you know, this is a murder mystery novel, I would say. This is a reverse murder mystery novel. So what made Alfred Bester's Demolished Man a wonderful novel? Because we had these side detectives who could read people's thoughts. He goes into some of those psychic sort of abilities in this one as well. Different type of abilities, but he sort of goes into that as well. So I'd say if you've enjoyed The Demolished Man by Alfred Bester and you want to push the envelope a bit, I'd say have a go at Golem 100. And if you've enjoyed this, I'm going to say you'll absolutely love The Demolished Man. Next on the list, I did say that this Golem 100 for me comes across many times as being a piece of satirical fiction, right? And I'd have to say that Kurt Vonnegut's Cat's Cradle is also this dystopian future. It's also ending, you know, in a really fascinating novel that I think if you haven't read Kurt Vonnegut and you've enjoyed Golem 100, I'd say have a go at this one and vice versa. And the other one which we've recently covered would be Stand on Zanzibar by John Brunner. This again is a dystopian future. It's an experiment of sorts as well, the way the novel's structured. It will take you some time to get to pull the pieces to make sense of what this one is. And in some ways, Golem 100 is like that as well. It is a bit disjointed. It takes some time for you to absorb all these imageries and understand what the novel is trying to take you to. But I think if you've enjoyed the experiment that is John Brunner's novel here, Stand on Zanzibar, I think you're going to like Golem 100 as well. It is a fascinating novel, if nothing else. So on Goodreads, I ranked this one, and I was contemplating it so many times. I think I actually switched it from my original 3 that I gave it. After a couple of days, having it soak in, getting the real sense of what the novel was, I changed that to a 4. So it is one that had me thinking for a while. Did I love it? Did I sort of think it was okay? Where does it stand? And what made me eventually pivot to a 4 out of 5 is the experiment of it all. So yeah, look, a fascinating novel. I can truly say it is the most fascinating novel I've read in the last probably 2 years at least, and nothing quite comes close to it. Look, I hope you've enjoyed that. It was an interesting novel, one that was really difficult to portray just how fascinating I think it was. I hope I've achieved that, and I hope you'll give this one a try, because I'd love to hear your comments. Have you read Golem 100? What were your thoughts on it? I can assume pretty safely that this one's going to be a polarizing novel, and I'd love to hear your take on it. I was fascinated. I found it intriguing, if it's not obvious enough by now, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you know of similar novels that are written in this style? Because I really couldn't think of many that had all this imagery sort of combined in a novel. Yeah, at times it almost felt like a graphic novel, right? So I'd love to hear from you if you know of similar novels. I sort of had a go at sharing some of those with you, but I'd love to hear your feedback on this one, because it's a fascinating one. All said and done, I've been Peter, this has been The Shed, and I'll see you next time in The Shed.